We've been fed a story since birth that being alone is a defect, a disease, a sign that something's broken inside you. Parents panic when their child sits quietly in a corner instead of chasing the herd. Teachers label the silent one antisocial. Society worships extroverts, those who thrive in the buzz of chatter, while it quietly fears the thinker who prefers silence. But here's the brutal truth. Loneliness for the intelligent is not a sickness. It's a strategy. Smart people don't avoid crowds because they can't belong. They avoid them because belonging costs too much. Every conversation soaked in small talk, every dinner table crowded with recycled opinions, every office buzzing with gossip, that's time stolen from their real work, thinking. And thinking, real thinking, requires solitude. Nietzsche warned us about this in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. He wasn't romanticizing loneliness. He was describing the brutal distance between the creator and the crowd. Science backs this up. Lee and Kanazawa's 2016 study in the British Journal of Psychology found something shocking. People with higher IQs reported lower life satisfaction when they socialized frequently. Translation: the smarter you are, the less you need the noise of constant company. Fast forward to 2025. The University of Bath confirmed that people scoring higher on predictive IQ forecasts actually make better decisions in isolation, without the distortions of peer pressure. While average minds thrive in the hive, sharper ones thrive in the cave. And yet, society still brands them misfits. Why? Because crowds hate reminders of their own mediocrity. The philosopher Schopenhauer said it with venom: the more a man has in himself, the less he will need from others. To the shallow, that sounds cold, but to the thinker, it's liberation. Solitude is not emptiness, it's a sanctuary, a forge where thought becomes fire. So here's the question nobody asks. If solitude is the natural habitat of intelligence, why does society work so hard to convince you it's shameful to live there? The answer lies in something darker, more primal, and it will shatter everything you've been told about the human need for connection. Let's strip this down. Society doesn't just dislike the loner, it fears them, because the solitary mind is untamed. The group can pressure you, guilt you, shame you into conformity, but the one who walks away, he can't be controlled. That's why every system, from schools to workplaces to politics, squeezes you toward the herd. They call it teamwork, collaboration, community. But scratch the surface and you'll see what it really is: enforced obedience. Schopenhauer wrote with disdain that ordinary people feel a burning need for constant company, because without it, their shallow minds echo with emptiness. They fear silence because silence reveals the void. The genius, however, thrives in it. The crowd calls him antisocial, but what he actually is sovereign. Kierkegaard called this the path to authenticity, refusing to dilute your existence in the false comfort of mass approval, and the science matches the philosophy. The APA's 2024 loneliness poll revealed that while loneliness devastates most demographics, high IQ individuals reported lower negative impact. Why? Because their solitude isn't loneliness, it's clarity. University of Reading studies in 2023 and 2024 confirmed this further. Solitude reduces cortisol spikes in high cognition individuals. Translation: smart people actually suffer less stress alone than they do in company. Imagine that. The very thing society calls unhealthy is for the intelligent the cure. Now let's turn this knife deeper. The average mind needs others to survive, not just economically, but psychologically. Strip away their group and their identity crumbles. That's why when a loner walks past, the mob doesn't see a human being. They see a threat. He reminds them of what they don't have, inner substance. That's why you hear phrases like, "he doesn't play well with others," or "she's isolated, probably depressed." They have to pathologize solitude to protect their fragile illusion that noise equals meaning. But here's the paradox. The very crowd that mocks solitude depends on the breakthroughs that only solitude produces. The inventions, the philosophies, the art that rewires the world. They weren't born in cocktail parties or group chats. They came from people who closed the door, turned the lock, and chose silence over chatter. So why does the mob insist that everyone needs friends, constant company, endless social validation? Because if they admitted the truth, that solitude fuels greatness, they'd have to confront their own dependence on the herd. And that's where the story gets even darker. Solitude isn't just about freedom, it's about power. A power society quietly fears and secretly tries to break. Here's the ugly arithmetic no one wants to admit. When a brilliant mind steps into a group, its sharpness doesn't multiply, it dulls. Groups don't elevate genius, they dilute it. Think about it. One brilliant idea enters a room of 10 average minds, and here's where the science twists the knife. The University of Bath's 2025 research on IQ forecasting revealed that people with higher predictive intelligence scores made worse decisions when exposed to constant group input. In isolation, their accuracy skyrocketed. Surrounded by chatter, it collapsed. The data is brutal but clear. If you're highly intelligent, crowds don't just bore you, they sabotage you. But society doesn't want you to know that. Because what would happen if the intelligent abandoned the noise? If they stopped playing the endless game of fitting in? Entire industries would collapse. Media thrives on mass attention, politics thrives on group hysteria, corporations thrive on the team player myth. The lone wolf threatens all of it. This is why smart people choose loneliness. Not because they hate others, but because they refuse to have their sharp edges sanded down by the blunt instrument of the crowd. But here's the question burning underneath. If solitude is the key to keeping intelligence intact, what happens when you don't just use it as a shield, but as a weapon? Most people see solitude as a retreat from life, from society, from the so-called real world. But for the intelligent, solitude isn't retreat. It's armament. It's sharpening the blade while everyone else dulls theirs on endless chatter. Schopenhauer hinted at this. Genius thrives in silence because that's where ideas ferment into revolutions. Carl Jung went even deeper. In Psychological Types, he framed introversion not as shyness, but as depth, a turning inward where the unconscious reveals its power. In solitude, the intelligent don't just escape noise, they confront their own abyss, and from that abyss, they pull up gold. Jung understood that the crowd keeps you horizontal, flat, surface-bound. Solitude lets you dig vertically into layers of thought the mob can't even imagine. And then there's flow, the state Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi devoted his life to studying. Flow rarely happens in noisy rooms or crowded offices. It happens when a person is so immersed in their craft that the world dissolves. That state, hours gone in minutes, the mind burning at full voltage, requires solitude like fire requires oxygen. Without it, the flame suffocates. Science doesn't just back this up, it exposes the consequences of ignoring it. A 2023 to 2025 wave of studies from Reading University showed that solitude reduces not only stress, but decision fatigue in high IQ individuals. The absence of noise preserves cognitive energy. This is why breakthroughs in math, in physics, in philosophy don't come from brainstorming circles. They come from one mind locked in a room, staring at the same problem until it cracks. And yet society insists on collaboration. Groupthink, meetings upon meetings. Why? Because if solitude is a weapon, then anyone who wields it becomes dangerous. They no longer need the mob for validation, for identity, for strength. They can generate power from within. And nothing terrifies the collective more than the individual who no longer needs it. So here's the paradox. The lonely genius is not weak, not deprived. They're armed. Every hour in silence is another sharpened edge. And when they finally emerge from solitude, they don't come back empty. They come back with something explosive, an idea, a theory, a vision that the crowd could never birth. But solitude has a darker cost too. And this cost is what separates the true solitary genius from the pretenders. Let's not romanticize this too neatly. Solitude is not all sunlight and brilliance. It extracts a price, a brutal one, and only the truly strong, mentally, spiritually, can pay it without collapsing. That's why most people run from it. Because when you strip away the crowd, you strip away the distractions, and what you're left with is raw, you alone staring at yourself. Nietzsche knew this torment. His solitude wasn't comfortable, it was volcanic. He wrote of walking the mountains, heart-pounding with ideas so intense they broke his health. Kierkegaard called solitude a kind of despair, but one necessary for authentic existence. You face the truth of your insignificance, your mortality, your failures. No crowd to cushion the blow, no warm applause to drown it out, just the abyss in your mind echoing back. And here's the irony. This darkness is what produces the light. Research from the APA's 2024 surveys found that high IQ individuals, while less damaged by loneliness, report more existential rumination during solitude. In plain language, they brood harder, they wrestle with meaning, they suffer more intense inner battles. But it is precisely those battles that refine their thinking. Jung warned, "No tree can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." That's solitude, a descent, so the ascent can be real. Even the science of stress supports this paradox. Reading University's 2025 updates show that while solitude lowers stress hormones in the intelligent, it also raises markers of deep cognitive strain, evidence of the mind burning hotter like a furnace under pressure. And yet those who can withstand it, who don't flee back to the mob for relief, emerge tempered, unbreakable. Most people crack. They call it depression, anxiety, madness. And sometimes, yes, it devours the thinker. But often, what looks like madness from the outside is simply a mind outgrowing the cage of common thought. The price of solitude is paid in pain, but the reward is vision. And that vision terrifies the world. Because once you've walked through that fire, you can't be manipulated by cheap comforts anymore. But here's the twist most people never see. Solitude doesn't just reshape the mind, it reshapes time itself. Crowds live in fractured time. Notifications, meetings, gossip, endless interruptions, each one slicing life into fragments. That's why the average person feels perpetually rushed, perpetually behind. They're not really living, they're just reacting, twitching to the rhythm of the mob. But in solitude, time changes shape. It stretches, deepens, becomes almost liquid. Hours blur into days without being wasted. This isn't mysticism, it's neuroscience. Csikszentmihalyi's research on flow proves that sustained focus bends subjective time. You step into a problem alone, and suddenly 3 hours vanish like smoke. No distraction, no fragmentation. Solitude is the portal into this altered state, where one idea can be pursued with surgical precision until it blossoms into something world-altering. History bears this out. Think of Newton, who during the plague years of 1665 to 1666 retreated into isolation and birthed calculus, optics, and the theory of gravity. Not in a lab surrounded by assistants, not in a committee, alone. Or consider Kierkegaard, who published book after book under different names, each written in lonely intensity, time folding around his obsession. The mob mocks the solitary, but it's solitude that lets a single lifetime contain what feels like centuries of thought. And the science today is catching up. A 2025 Bavbath University study revealed that high IQ participants in solitude not only made more accurate decisions, but also perceived their productivity as vastly higher. Not because they worked longer, but because their sense of time expanded in focus. Contrast this with low IQ groups who reported time dragging in loneliness. For the intelligent, solitude doesn't slow time, it makes it rich. This is the hidden weapon. When you reclaim time, you reclaim life. The loner doesn't just avoid the dull pull of the herd, he multiplies his existence. While others lose decades in endless chatter, he compresses genius into moments. But here's where it gets explosive. Solitude doesn't just stretch time for the individual, it creates rifts in history itself. Because the breakthroughs forged in silence don't just alter one life, they alter the trajectory of everyone who comes after. Look around you. The phone in your hand, the code behind it, the very theories of physics that make it possible, none of this came from dinner parties or brainstorming circles. It came from loners. Newton in his plague year solitude, Tesla wandering alone through New York parks, sketching machines no one believed in, Nietzsche writing in near isolation until madness swallowed him, Kierkegaard mocked by Copenhagen society yet reshaping modern thought. These weren't social butterflies, they were exiles. Outcasts, and their exile built the world. And still, society dares to label the loner broken, as if solitude is failure, as if being comfortable in silence signals some defect. But look at the data. Lai and Kanazawa's 2016 research remains a cornerstone. High IQ individuals are less happy the more they socialize. Add to that Bath University's 2025 findings. Smarter people's judgments collapse under group influence but sharpen in solitude. And the picture is undeniable. The very people accused of not fitting in are the ones carrying civilization forward. But here's the hypocrisy. The same masses that shame the solitary rely entirely on their work. They scroll through social platforms invented by introverted coders. They worship art born from lonely studios. They binge philosophies that were written in nights of torment and silence. Society lives off the milk of solitude while spitting in the face of those who provide it. Jung once said that loneliness doesn't come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate what matters. That is the fate of the intelligent. They forge something too vast for the crowd to grasp, and then watch as the mob ridicules the very silence that birthed it. Until, of course, years later, the same mob pretends it always understood. So the question becomes, if solitude is this powerful, this necessary, this world-shaping, why do the intelligent still wrestle with guilt over choosing it? Why do they still feel the pull of shame, the whisper that they're missing out? That's the final, cruelest trick society plays. And in the last part, we're going to rip the mask off that lie. Here's the final truth. The shame around loneliness isn't natural. It's engineered. It's propaganda baked into culture, whispered into classrooms, sold through films, reinforced in offices. Why? Because a population at ease in solitude is dangerous. You can't manipulate people who don't need approval. You can't herd those who don't crave the herd. The intelligent feel the tug of guilt, not because solitude hurts them, but because society can't afford them breaking free. That's why loner gets framed as insult. That's why antisocial is coded as pathology. But peel back the rhetoric, and what do you find? Solitude is where self-mastery is born. It's where Nietzsche's overman takes shape, where Kierkegaard's authentic individual emerges, where Jung's introvert dives to depths no extrovert can even see. And now the science, real, modern science, finally admits it. APA data in 2024 showed high IQ individuals don't collapse under loneliness the way others do. Reading University's findings prove solitude lowers their stress. Bath's 2025 research shows their judgment thrives in isolation. Put it together, and the evidence is brutal. Solitude isn't a defect of intelligence, it's its environment. It's the native soil where genius grows. Think about it. Every revolution in human thought, every paradigm shift that mattered, began in silence. A monk in a cell, a philosopher pacing alone, a scientist scribbling furiously in a dark study. Crowds don't change the world, they maintain it. Solitude does. And the ones who can endure it, who can stand the abyss without running, are the ones who bend history. So if you've ever been told you're too quiet, too withdrawn, too alone, understand this. What they call weakness is the very thing that keeps your mind intact, sharp, unbroken by the sludge of mediocrity. Loneliness isn't the absence of life, it's the crucible of it. Smart people choose loneliness not because they can't connect, but because they won't dilute. They know the crowd doesn't deserve all of them. And maybe that's the most terrifying truth of all, that solitude isn't exile, it's sovereignty. So the next time you find yourself in silence, don't flinch, don't reach for the phone. Don't chase the noise, sit in it, let it carve you raw. Because while the herd drowns in chatter, you'll be forging something they can never touch. Clarity, strength, vision. And in that moment you'll realize, loneliness was never loneliness. It was power all along.